Okay, thank you, sir. Good evening. Welcome, everyone, to Gita Wisdom with Lakshmi. I'm so pleased to be in your association this evening, where we can continue our meditation on the Bhagavad Gita. So we continue from chapter 4, text 35. And this is an interesting sequence of verses which are leading to the conclusion of chapter 4, very profound chapter in the Bhagavad Gita. So let us begin. This verse comes after a very famous verse. I'll read that, text 34. Krishna reveals the secret which allows us to enter into spiritual life in earnest. He says, and I'm quoting Sanskrit here because I like to start off our sessions with Sanskrit to put us in the proper mood. So he says in this particular verse, this is text 34 of chapter 4, Tad vidhi pradipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam ganinas tattvadarshanaha. So if you notice in this particular verse, jnana, the word jnana, which is knowledge, appears a couple of times. So it's the emphasis of this verse and the succession of verses that follow. And the translation reads as follows: just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. So the self-realized souls. So we see here, first off, what Krishna is saying is, in order to realize or come in contact with the truth, and the truth meaning that which is absolute by nature, which means it's not temporary. So I just have to do something really quickly to keep my, there we go, keep my notes on here. Okay. So Krishna is saying, if you want to come in contact with the absolute truth, then in order to do so, we have to get a teacher. Now, I mean, this is not something that's foreign to us. It doesn't matter what country or what culture you're from. No matter what country or what culture or what religion, the principle of receiving education from a teacher is something that permeates every culture, is it not? No matter where you're from, you go to a teacher, and the teacher, if you fulfill the qualifications of a student, imparts knowledge to you. What are the qualifications of a student? Well, Krishna says here, the student who is interested in spiritual life has to possess two qualifications in order to be allowed entrance into this wisdom, this transcendental wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita. What are those two qualifications? Inquire submissively and render service unto the teacher. Now, inquiring submissively means a certain attitude in your approach. It means that you're accepting your teacher, and when you inquire from that teacher, it's with a humble attitude. It's not like, I already know it, or challenging attitude. This is not what Krishna is referring to here. He's referring to a submissive, a humble attitude, and simultaneously to do service for that teacher. Now, what does that exactly mean? It means that the teacher may require some things of you in terms of your study, in terms of your devotional practice. For instance, one of the things that my teacher required of me in order to become his student was to chant every day. So one of the requirements to be initiated by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada was that you promised to chant every day, a minimum of 16 rounds of Hare Krishna mantra, which takes about 2 hours of your day. And then to follow regulative principles, the four regulative principles of spiritual life, according to the Vaishnava or the Bhakti Yoga tradition, which means vegetarian, no meat, fish, or eggs. It also means we no intoxications, no gambling, and that you remain faithful and committed in your relationship with your significant other. So those four things are required for a student in order to render service submissively to their spiritual master. So these are qualifications. The qualification of a spiritual master is not that he just looks the part, but he not only has to talk the talk, but he has to walk the walk. What does that mean? It means that he's not only teaching you from Bhagavad Gita, he's also living a life that is in direct conjunction with the principles and the mood of the Bhagavad Gita. So these are the qualifications of the teacher, that he is or she is consistent with the teachings of Bhagavad Gita in their life. One of the things I heard, which I always like, is that what they do behind closed doors is what they'll do out in public. In other words, out in public, you strike one pose, the spiritual pose, and then behind closed doors, you're doing all kinds of nonsense. That is not the qualification of a spiritual teacher. The spiritual teacher is transparent. That's one of the words that Prabhupada would use quite often, transparent via media of the truth. So that person is behaving outwardly and inwardly consistently the same. So when one is fortunate enough to come upon such a person, a self-realized soul, and living according to the tenets of Bhagavad Gita, then that is good fortune. That is great fortune. And when we come upon that person, then we seek from that person wisdom. We ask that person, can you kindly impart to me the wisdom that you know, the wisdom that you have, and can you please share that wisdom with me? So this is one of the most important verses in Bhagavad Gita because it gives us, a guideline how we can enter into the mysteries of transcendence, the mysteries of the Bhagavad Gita itself. One of the words that's used is Gupta, or the mysteries, the secrets. And the secrets of Bhagavad Gita can be revealed to one who meets those qualifications. So that's kind of like the setting for the next sequence of verses. We'll read text 35. Again, I'm going to read the Sanskrit just to keep the mood. Yajgyatva na punar moham evam yasyasi pandava yena bhutan yasheshani draksyash yatmani atomani. And the translation is as follows. 34 says, once you find that person and you render service and you answer or you question submissively, then you will obtain knowledge. 35 says, having attained real knowledge from a self-realized soul. So this is speaking to someone who is meeting with success in their journey for the truth. You will never fall again into such illusion. That's a very powerful statement. It means you find this personality, a self-realized soul. That self-realized soul agrees to have you as their student. As their student, you fulfill certain qualifications as they fulfill qualifications of being a teacher. And then They impart this knowledge to you. You become, you begin your journey towards self-realization. And therefore, while you're in that journey, while you're having these levels of realization and understanding, then you are protected from illusion. You will never fall again into illusion. For by this knowledge, the knowledge that is imparted to you from the self-realized soul, you will see that all living beings are but part of the Supreme, or in other words, that they are mine. So Krishna is saying, you begin to see in a unified manner. One of the symptoms of illusion is that you see so much diversity. We see people according to their race, we see people according to their ethnicity, we see people according to their religion, we see people according to the country that we're born. We make all of these distinctions, which actually keep us separated from them. The unification comes when we understand that we're all spirit souls. This is the knowledge which um, helps us to rise above the illusion. What is illusion mean? Illusion means you're not seeing things as they really are. For instance, a when we're on the desert, right? What do we see? We can either see the desert or we see the mirage, right? What is the mirage? Mirage is really a form of delusion that is caused by the heat and the reactions of the heat, etc. So we may see an oasis that's not there. That's an illusion. That is something that's not real, but we're perceiving it as if it were real. It's not that it doesn't have basis in reality. A mirage, like if you see water, but that water is not there, it's not that water, there's no basis for water. Water exists, but does it exist there? No, it doesn't exist there. It's a mirage, it's an illusion. So you're seeing something that's really not there, and you're thinking that it is there. So that's called Maya. Maya means that which is not. Maya means that which is not. It's not there. So when we see or when we're thinking we're the body, that's an illusion. It's an illusion in the sense the body exists, but it's temporary. It's not a permanent situation. It's as Krishna describes it in the Bhagavad Gita, it's a machine made of material energy that we inhabit. We, the soul, inhabit this machine made of material energy. Just like if you go into an apartment, you may lease an apartment for a specified period of time. That apartment is not you, nor will you stay in that apartment for an eternity. You're there in that apartment. How many places have you lived in? I mean, I can't even count how many places I've lived in, from the time that I moved out of the house, so it's a temporary situation. So truth or knowledge, according to Bhagavad Gita, its basis in reality is its basis in eternity. So Krishna says, knowledge, real knowledge, um, you'll never fall again into illusion. In other words, you won't think again that the temporary situation is who you really are. The body, it's not who you really are. The mind. And what is causing our mind to be activated, What are the actions of the mind? Well, the mind um, is the repository for senses, right? Senses and sense perception. What does that mean? It means whatever data, information you are getting from the senses interacting with the external world, whatever you are seeing with your eyes, hearing with your ears, smelling with your nose, tasting with your tongue, feeling with your sense of touch, all of these are senses. Okay. I'm just reading something on here saying something about my speaker. You all can hear me, right? Just shake your head. Okay, good. So our senses are interacting with the external world. It's reaching out and it's supplying us with all kinds of information. And one of the functions of the mind is to be the repository or the recipient of that information. And then it takes that information and it stores it, it catalogs it, it causes memory, or imagination. What is imagination? What the mind is able to do with all this information and how it can combine the information. For instance, Prabhupada gives the example of a golden mountain. Is there a mountain that is gold, solid gold? No, but we can envision or we can imagine a golden mountain. Why? Because we have experience of gold and we have experience of a mountain. And we can combine those two experiences creatively through imagination, and we can envision a golden mountain. So that's another function of the mind. So the mind has many different functions, but the mind is part of the machine and the functioning of the machine that's made of material energy. In fact, in the seventh chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says there are 8 elements of this material energy, which comprise this material energy. It's easy to understand the first 5, the gross elements: earth, water, fire, air, ether, right? Earth, water, fire, air, ether. 5 elements. It's easy to understand. Okay, I can see how those 5 elements are part of the external world. But then the next 3 are the subtle elements, and that's mind, intelligence, and ego. The mind is not the brain. The mind is an element that facilitates memory, imagination, categorization of sense perception, et cetera, et cetera. It is an element which actually facilitates or allows that function to take place in your body. And what is intellect? Intellect is the ability to distinguish between right and wrong, between matter and spirit. The intellect has that ability to discriminate. It's also considered by Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras as one of the functions of the overmind, which is called chitta. Chitta is comprised of mind, chitta is comprised of intellect, and chitta is comprised of your ego. What is your ego? Your ego is how you identify yourself. So when we say you are identifying yourself as the body, in my case, a 75-year-old male, Caucasian, et cetera, all the other designations that go along with that, that is part of my ego because that is really not who I am. It's who I am acting as now, according to my karma. I'm acting in that capacity, but in reality, that identity will disappear when this body disappears. And this is what Krishna is calling. what he's talking about when he's talking about knowledge. In Vaishnava or Bhakti Yoga theology, knowledge, jnana, and ignorance, avidya, the word in Sanskrit for ignorance is avidya. The word for knowledge in Sanskrit is vidya. So avidya means without knowledge. So knowledge and ignorance are defined not merely, so by the Bhakti Yoga tradition, not merely by information or intellect. We talk about knowledge from the perspective of Bhagavad Gita, but by one's relationship to God and devotional realization. So establishing that relationship and having realization about that relationship, which actually causes purification and entrance into the eternality that we are. We are eternal. We are knowledgeable, fully cognizant beings, and we are blissful. So, knowledge of that relationship and acting according to knowledge, because knowledge means in Sanskrit gyan, and realization of that knowledge is vigyan. So when you have, it's not enough to have knowledge. Knowledge is good, but it's all there in the mind, in the intellect. The step higher in knowledge is to act on that knowledge. And from your acting on that knowledge, it takes it a step further, steps deeper. When you act on the knowledge that you've acquired, right? They'll call it experience. And if you've ever answered an ad for a job, right? Experience required. Why do they want an experienced person? Okay, I just got out of college. I have my PhD in this particular subject matter. Let's say microbiology. I have a PhD in microbiology. I'm very learned. But what they'll say experience, because experience means you've taken that knowledge and you put it into action. And that action causes you to understand the knowledge that you have much, much better, much, much deeper. So this is the Vaishnava tradition. In order to gain knowledge, you have to have knowledge of your relationship with the Supreme and the realization which comes as a result of having this knowledge of the Supreme. Ignorance is avidya. Avidya, that means not knowledge. You don't have knowledge. And one of the symptoms of avidya is ignorance. Ignorance means to ignore. Sometimes we like to think of it otherwise, but really what it means is to ignore the reality of our eternality, the reality of the truth of that. We ignore that by fully absorbing ourselves in the body and everything in relationship to the body and the mind. And when that is our only concern, that is called ignorance, because that's not who we really are. We're much more than that. We're spirit souls. So ignorance is forgetfulness of one's eternal identity as the subservient, as the servant of the Supreme. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna refers to that relationship between him and the soul. So that is ignorance. If we are not aware of our identity, our relationship in service to God, then that's considered being in ignorance. Avidya karma samgya anya tritiya shaktir ishite. Ignorance means, so this is how we categorize ignorance. Ignorance means identifying with A, the material body and the mind, thinking that we are the body and the mind, and clinging to that. One of the Patanjali talks in the Yoga Sutras, one of the kleshas, or one of the manifestations of ignorance, is clinging to the notion that we are this body. I mean, God, isn't it a relief to know that we're not our bodies? To know that, when the body expires, when it reaches its expiration date, that we still continue to exist in if we are self-realized in our fully realized state of eternality, cognizance, and bliss in service to God. That's our eternal relationship. So ignorance means, rather than that identity of God and relationship with God, loving relationship to God, we place all of our efforts into this temporary body and this temporary mind. And, I've used this analogy several times. It's like investing your money into a company that's going to go bankrupt. It's not hard to see our bodies as eventually going bankrupt or closing down, shutting down. I think they call it death. Then the second part of ignorance is the false ego. The false ego means the capacity of the mind, the overmind, the chitta, the capacity to identify with something that you're not. That is Maya, not this. To identify with the external energy puts you in a state which is called Maya or illusion. Thinking or identifying, you're assuming an identity that is not really yours. And all living beings can be subjected to that state of existence. Even Indra. Does everybody know who Indra is? If you don't know who Indra is the king of the demigods. Is considered a very powerful and exalted personality. But Indra had a way of getting himself into trouble. And the many ways that he got himself into trouble mainly was forgetting who was really the king, who was the supreme. He would forget Krishna's supremacy or God's supremacy, and that he was subservient, even though he had this big position as the king of the demigods. He would sometimes forget, and he would get himself into trouble. And the end result of his getting into trouble is he would be cursed. And one time he was cursed. The specifics of what he did, I can't remember, but he for doing something. Um, for doing something which was not appropriate, he was cursed. What was the curse? He would take the body of a pig. So Indra, who was the king, the lofty king of the demigods, he took the body of a pig. Now, what happens when the soul enters into a body? There is varying degrees of ignorance. So when you're in an animal body, the ignorance is heavy. And that's why it allows the soul, the eternally blissful and knowledgeable spark of spiritual energy, allows that or creates an environment which the soul can only see in relationship to the body that it is in. So even Indra was this exalted soul. He entered into this pig's body. And you know what happened? He thought he was a pig. So he did everything that pigs do. What do pigs do? They live in pigsties. They live in, in dirt, mud. What else do pigs do? Well, if you're a male pig, you seek a female pig. And when you find the female pig, you have the relationships and you bear piglets. So Indra found a female pig. They had piglets and they lived happily ever after. No, they didn't live happily after because eventually Brahma saw how deep illusion Indra was, so much so that he thought he was the pig and he thought he was the father of the piglets and the husband of the female pig, and he was living his nice pig life. And Brahma came and he said to him, you have to become free from this illusion. Your curse is over and it's now time to go back to your position. And Indra didn't want to do it. He didn't want to leave his comfortable pigsty with all his little piglets and his wife. So eventually, what Brahma had to do is he had to kill the piglets and the wife. And then all of a sudden, it was like shock. And sometimes when we have trauma in our lives, there's a couple of things that can happen when we have trauma. When we have trauma, we can fall into depression and only think about the trauma or only be influenced by the trauma. Or sometimes the trauma causes us to have an awakening. So in the case of Indra, because he was actually an exalted being, the trauma caused his awakening. And then he went back to his position as being king of the demigods. So that's the power of avidya to cause the illusion. And avidya means you think you're the material body or mind. You identify with it. That's called the ego, the false ego. And then you relate to the temporary designations, your gender, your nationality, your profession, your caste, your scholarship, all of those things you relate to. That's part of, falling into ignorance or avidya. What are the characteristics of ignorance? According to Bhagavad Gita, we see many separate causes and lose sight of the fact that there is only one cause, one supreme cause, and that is the Supreme Lord, that is God, the supreme cause, not all these other little factors that take place in the course of our life. So we see the characteristics of ignorance. We see many separate causes, and we lose sight of the one supreme cause. Knowledge is confined to your karma, your desire for sense pleasure, or if you have a little bit of an advancement in knowledge, you seek out to become one with the spiritual energy called Brahman. That's called Mayavad or impersonal liberation. That's another characteristic of ignorance. Even sophisticated philosophy without bhakti is considered ignorance. So even you can be the topmost philosopher or scientist, if you deny your existence as soul, as part and parcel of the Supreme, as subservient to the Supreme, and that your purpose or your function is to serve the Supreme, then even you may have so many degrees, you may be big philosopher or scientist, etc. You're still considered to be under the influence of avidya. Now, that are giving us some characteristics of avidya. So what are the characteristics of knowledge? Vidya. Avidya, ignorance. Vidya means knowledge. True knowledge is to know one's relationship with God, to know who is God, and to act in that relationship through bhakti, through love and devotion. That is knowledge as described in Bhagavad Gita. Knowledge culminates, the characteristic of knowledge is that you surrender to your position as servant of the Supreme, and you act according to that. And jnana, or knowledge, is complete only when it leads to bhakti. So knowledge's real value is when it helps us to understand the principles of that there is a Supreme Lord, that we are eternal living entities, that we have a relationship with the Supreme in love and devotion, that we are in this material world encased or embodied in the material elements because of the misidentification that is caused by connection to these material elements. All of these are things that demonstrate or characteristics of knowledge. When we see someone who is surrendered, who is a surrendered soul to God and the self-realized soul who is the teacher leading you on your path, those are indicators that you're entering into knowledge, that you're seeing the rope for what it is and not as a snake. There's a metaphor that's commonly used in the Vedic texts of walking on a path, a dark path, no light, and you see a rope and you think it's a snake. So what happens is when the thought is in your mind, it becomes like your reality. That thought that rope is a snake, it becomes the reality. And then what happens when you see a snake? You experience fear that that snake may bite you and kill you. So that even though it's a rope, just a very misunderstanding, misidentification of the rope being a snake causes the same mental and physical reactions as if it were a snake. So that is one example, one metaphor that's given in the Vedic text of being in the darkness of ignorance, not seeing things as they really are. That we go through all of these different feelings and emotions, but that is not our reality. Our reality is not fear. Our reality is not hatred. Our reality is not anger. Our reality is not lust. These various feelings and emotions are not our reality. It is the cause of thinking the rope to be a snake, or thinking that we are these material bodies and mind. And when we think like that, then we experience all of these emotions in that way. That's why Krishna emphasizes, and he continues to emphasize in this particular part of the Bhagavad Gita, the importance of knowledge. And in other places too, he talks about the importance of knowledge. But in these next verses that we're going to talk about, Krishna is really emphasizing what knowledge can do, what the potency of knowledge. Knowledge burns away our karmic reactions. It has that potency. As fire can burn wood to ashes, the fire of knowledge, understanding the reality of our situation, has the potency to burn away our reactions. So, what are the various levels of knowledge? There's different levels. One is called tattva, understanding the truth. Whenever you hear the word tattva, it means the truth of the matter. So Jnana, that helps us to understand the truth of our reality, the truth of our situation. These are important principles. What is part of the tattva? That there is God, the supreme being, monotheistically. In Bhagavad Gita, that supreme being is identified as Krishna. That the jiva, the soul, is qualitative. Now try to wrap your mind around this. Qualitatively, the same as God, but quantitatively different. And the analogy that is often used is a drop of ocean water has the same minerals and components as the entirety of the ocean. What is the distinction? Qualitatively, it's the same as the ocean. Quantitatively, it's different. So the jiva is distinct, is independent, distinct, and it is separate eternally, but it is also full of knowledge, eternal, and full of bliss. Material energy is different than the jiva. The jiva is the spiritual energy, right? And the material energy is a separated energy. So we see that there are distinctions, there are separation between understanding. It's called beta. Beta means differences or distinctions. So this is one of the levels of knowledge within the framework of knowledge. Krishna, or there is a supreme God. The jiva is part and parcel of that supreme, quantitatively different, but qualitatively the same. And the material energy is something different. It is a separated energy. It is an energy which is temporary by nature. Then the second level of knowledge is in relationships. What is the relationship of the soul with God? What is the relationship of the soul with the world around us? What is the relationship of the world around us with God? And what is the duty and meaning of our existence? What is our duty and what is the meaning? What is the purpose of our existence? This is another level of knowledge, which is quite often called sambandha. Third level of knowledge is called knowing how to act. When you get knowledge of your position as soul, then what the next level of knowledge is that you act accordingly. You act according to your spiritual nature. That means not that you stop doing, like for instance, if you have your duty as a father or a mother to your child, you don't stop doing that, but you do it with the recognition that you are soul, your wife is a soul, your child is a soul, and you have a relationship with them. And part of the purpose of that relationship is to help them, to help facilitate their understanding of their relationship and their acting according to their relationship. Then another part of the activity is the sadhana that we do. When we practice yoga, we have a sadhana. So a level of knowledge is when you actually take on as your responsibility and your commitment the sadhana. In the bhakti yoga case, chanting, hearing, knowledge, wisdom, swadhyaya coming from Bhagavad Gita and other sacred texts. And then regulating your life in service to God, in service to Krishna. And then the fourth and final level of knowledge is called prayojana, and that means pure love. That you are, by having an awareness of your spiritual position, by acting on a platform according to truth, then you develop, you purify the heart, you free yourself from karmic reactions, and you enter into a deep state of love in relationship to God. So those are the four levels of knowledge. So in bhakti, we try to keep in mind that bhakti is primarily service through love and devotion to God. And what facilitates that and helps us to become fixed in that are the various aspects of knowledge. And Krishna gives a very nice series of verses in the Bhagavad Gita in the 13th chapter, 8th through 13th verses, 8 through 13 in the 13th chapter. Krishna says, these are the items of knowledge: humility, pridelessness, nonviolence, tolerance, simplicity, seeking out a self-realized soul, cleanliness, steadiness. See, these are all things or characteristics that manifest within a person who is uh, living a life of knowledge, acquiring knowledge and living according to knowledge, jnana and vijnana, as we discussed. So these qualities naturally manifest. They don't, as you purify the heart, as you free yourself from karmic reactions due to the fire of knowledge, due to the practice of that knowledge, incorporating or assimilating that knowledge into your life and acting accordingly, all these things happen. And then these characteristics of knowledge begin to manifest: the humility, the pridelessness, nonviolence, tolerance, simplicity, finding, seeking out a self-realized soul and taking knowledge from that soul, cleanliness, steadiness, self-control, renunciation of sensory gratification as your primary goal in life. Um, you your false ego, your misidentification begins to evaporate, just like when the sun manifests,
No,
fog
no, no.
dissipates.
In
Fog
your paper.
dissipates.
Paper. Paper, please. Paper, please.
Okay. So I don't know what happens. Sometimes you hit your I did it. I got it. Sometimes you hit your unmute button. So be careful of that because everybody can hear. So these are all manifestations, the perception of birth and death, old age and disease. Now, when we say old age and disease is a manifestation of knowledge, then we could say, well, everybody realizes they're going to get old and everybody realizes when they're sick. But understanding that that is part of your karmic journey. Getting sick, disease, is part of your karmic journey. Growing old is part of your karmic journey. So it's not only that you understand old age, but you understand old age in its proper perspective and disease in its proper perspective as your karmic journey. Detachment. What does detachment mean? As a principle of knowledge, it means that you actually become attached to your tattva or to your truth as a soul in relationship, in loving relationship to God. When you develop that as your attachment, rather than to enjoy everything that your mind says or your senses scream for, when you make that change, when you try to experience the loving relationship between you and God, then you quite naturally become detached from sensory pursuits because you see the futility in it, the bankruptcy in it, and therefore. So these are all items of knowledge that Krishna says manifest when you practice the bhakti yoga system and you gain this transcendental or spiritual knowledge. So I think I'm going to. So let's do a little comparison based on what I've just spoken about. What would be ignorance? I am this body. That is considered a state of ignorance. What would be knowledge? I am not this body. I am a spirit soul. And my eternal dharma, my eternal duty is to serve God. Ignorance would be a mentality that the world is meant for my enjoyment. I am the center of the universe. Everything revolves around my desire. That is a manifestation of ignorance, the enjoyer mentality. What is the manifestation of knowledge? The servant mentality, that I'm a servant of God and everything is for his pleasure. My purpose in life is to please God. When I please God, who is the cause of all causes, sarva kara karanam, he's the cause of all causes, then that's like pouring water onto the root of the tree. It's described as that. Then when your life becomes a dedication, a sacrifice, an offering to please God, then everything is benefited by such a mentality. Ignorance, God as an abstract, maybe it's a nice philosophical wandering, but it's not really. If there was a God, why wouldn't I see him? Something like that mentality. Or that I am God, that mentality. I'm part of this vast ocean of spiritual energy, which everything comes from Brahman, and I am that Brahman. That is considered a type of ignorance. What is knowledge in that relationship? That I know that there is a God, that what that God looks like, what that God likes, how I can serve that God nicely, that God is personable, and that God is lovable, that God is love, and God is lovable. That is knowledge. What is ignorance? That to become God, oneness, that is considered a form of ignorance. And what is considered knowledge? That love of God is my goal. Love of God, not to become God, not to be sugar, but to taste sweetness. So we don't want to become God. We want to taste the sweetness that is there, that's contained in a loving relationship between the soul and the Supreme. Last manifestation of ignorance would be self-effort centered. Your life is like everything I do is for my benefit. Everything is based on selfishness or centricity, self-centered lifestyle. Whereas when we act in knowledge, we understand it is grace-centered, that by the blessings of the Supreme, everything happens the way it's supposed to happen, and I will experience what I'm supposed to experience in relationship. So let us continue with our reading. because I gave you kind of like the substance, and let's see what Krishna has to say here. 36. Even if you are considered to be the most sinful of all sinners, when you are situated in the boat of transcendental knowledge, you will be able to cross over the ocean of misery. You will have the power to overcome the weakness, the faults, the sinful nature. Text 37. As a blazing fire turns firewood to ashes, O Arjuna, so does the fire of knowledge burn to ashes all reactions to material activities. So this is the importance of absorbing ourselves in this wisdom, this transcendental wisdom. Once we are cultivate the mindset, the mentality, the awareness of our true position, our tattva, our truth, that awareness, that knowledge burns our karmic reactions, both negative and positive, so we don't have to return to the wheel of samsara or the wheel of birth and death and rebirth. Text 38. In this world, there is nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. Such knowledge is the mature fruit of all mysticism, and one who has become accomplished in the practice of bhakti enjoys this knowledge within himself in due course of time. Text 39. A faithful man who is dedicated to transcendental knowledge and who subdues his senses is eligible to achieve such knowledge, and having achieved it, quickly attains the supreme spiritual peace. Text 40. But ignorant and faithless persons who doubt the revealed scriptures do not attain God consciousness. They fall down. In other words, they continue their journey in this material world under the influence of the gunas, the modes of material nature. For the doubting soul, there is happiness neither in this world nor in the next. Strength of faith. How do you develop faith? Through association with those who have firm faith. Whenever you associate with someone with conviction, right? Say you want to learn how to swim, and you go to a teacher, and that teacher knows how to swim. That teacher can dive, and practically speaking, into any body of water and swim, has conviction. So a person who has firm faith, if you associate with that person and hear from that person, you too will develop this conviction, this firm faith. Text 41. One who acts in devotional service or bhakti, renouncing the fruits of his action, which Krishna described in the second chapter, and whose doubts have been destroyed by transcendental knowledge, is situated factually in the self. So three things. Acts in devotion to the Lord, renounces the fruits of his action, sees them as an offering to God, and doubts have been removed. I have the conviction that I am a spirit soul in service to the Supreme. Is factually situated in the self, thus not bound by the reactions of work. And the last verse of this chapter, I believe, yes. Therefore, the doubts which have arisen in your heart out of ignorance should be slashed by the weapon of knowledge. Armed with yoga, O Bharata, stand and fight. So Krishna is repeating the point. I'm giving you this wisdom, and this wisdom will help you to overcome the weakness that you experienced, the doubt that you had in your true nature, soul, and your service to the Supreme. So that concludes the fourth chapter, folks. Next week, we will continue with the fifth chapter. If we have any questions or comments, please feel free to ask them right now. Any
Hare Krishna,
questions?
Prabhu. Sorry about
Yes.
the unmuting earlier.
That's
It's a kind
okay.
of chaotic here with Little Sham.
I
Um,
understand the dilemma of a mother.
Thank you for understanding. I had a question about what you were mentioning about enjoyment and in the material world, about
Hmm.
being in the ignorant
Hmm.
mode, in the ignorance
Hmm.
mode.
Hmm.
Up to what point it comes to ignorance? For example, I enjoy helping with Ratha Yatra permits and stuff. So is that still
No,
enjoyment in the ignorance mode? Like up
no.
to what point
bec-
can you tell your mind to enjoy?
yes, you can experience because you know Krishna is pleased by
Okay,
your service, right? You're doing Rath Yatra. What is Rath Yatra? It's a glorification of Lord Jagannath, Krishna in his form of Jagannath. And when you're making that effort, the reason you're feeling the satisfaction within your heart is because Krishna is pleased by your efforts. You
sometimes
could
it's completely annoying dealing with all the situations, but I still enjoy it more than doing other stuff, you know?
well, that's part of the austerity of performing devotional service. It's not free from, the stress that may be there and all the activities they have to do in order to get this festival going on. Prabhupada said that. He said it's not like, we don't experience anxiety in service to the Lord. We do, but we
Sometimes.
understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, we understand that anxiety is because I'm performing actions that may be difficult to perform and austere to perform, but with the ultimate purpose and understanding that this is for God's pleasure. And even that anxiety becomes transformed.
Okay.
It's amazing that Radharani, who is the topmost servant of Krishna, sometimes she would be in anxiety in her service to Krishna. So when we are giving our hearts to God in service, everything, every emotion, everything, Hanuman became angry on behalf because he was serving Lord Ram. And when someone tried to obstruct that service or tried to defeat Ram, like in Ravana's case, it said Hanuman would become angry. So that anger, all the emotions, we don't become devoid of emotion. Our emotion is in relationship to our service to God.
Watch. Watch. Okay, so we're still
And,
gonna feel emotions, exactly, and it's still gonna it's we're still in the material world, so
yeah, we're feeling emotions in relationship to our
it's hard to
service.
block those. I mean, it's still hard to control the mind. Imagine controlling the emotions.
Yeah, like, well, let's use Srila Prabhupada as an example, right? Prabhupada's ecstasy was serving Krishna through starting the International Society for Krishna Consciousness and all the things that were required. But that was as it was part of Radharani's ecstasy, her anxiety and loving Krishna and serving to Krishna. That was the way ecstasy manifests for her. So in pure devotion, that even we experience these various emotions, it's really not separate. Our anxiety becomes problem. Our sadness becomes problem. All these emotions that we experience becomes a problem when they're due to us not getting what we want out of this world. But when we're serving God, it no longer becomes that issue. It becomes we're serving Krishna. And it may take, a lot of effort and a lot of organization and a lot of energy, but it becomes ecstasy. I remember so many times, I was temple president, as you know, in New York. And the first New York City Rath Yatra was in 1976. And there were so many details to put that Rath Yatra on. So many, we had to get permits. permits from the
That's a
city,
huge scale Ratha
permits from the
Yatra,
park.
definitely. Yeah.
So many things. We had to, we feeding 10,000 people, you're
Wow.
putting on a stage performance of devotional activity. So many things were there. And you necessarily, we became anxious. But when it was all over, when we made the offering, when the Rath Yatra actually took place, and so many people were blessed with Lord Jagannath and Srila Prabhupada's association, people who would never come in contact with Krishna or Krishna's pure devotee. Thousands of people as a result of that anxiety. The end result of that was a feeling of great satisfaction and happiness within the heart. So it becomes a manifestation of your ecstasy in service. Whereas anxiety, which is a problem, which is all consuming, is because you're not getting what you want, what your senses and mind are demanding. And that's debilitating. It's not invigorating. So it's a concept. If you can wrap your mind around that concept, it's actually all emotions now become transformed when they're experienced in relationship to your serving God. So all blessings to you, Triana, for you're a
Oh,
young
blessings
mother.
for you and your class and easing our minds during the middle of the week.
Yeah. All blessings to you as a mother of a nice child, and you're still doing the service. Thank you very much. Does
Thank you
anyone
so
else
much,
have
Krishna.
any question or comment they would like to put forth to our esteemed group here? Any observation, any realization, any question?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, the Shaktiman Das.
Hey, Shaktiman, Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
What?
Thank you so much for the lecture.
You're welcome.
Yeah, just one comment. So today morning I was listening to Srila Prabhupada's lecture, and he was mentioning the about the ocean and the drop of ocean, about the Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva. So after listening
Yeah.
to your class, you reminded me that. And the another example he gave is also about the gold mine and the gold, that piece of gold.
Yes. Those are
Yeah.
two metaphors to help us understand this very important principle of soul and the distinction between soul and the super soul. And another thing, he would use the gold and the gold mine, drop of water and the ocean, and a particle of sunlight and the sun. So all these indicate that there is finiteness and infiniteness. So the soul is finite, Brahman, and the Supreme Lord, Krishna, Paramatma, the Super Soul, is infinite. That's the distinction, eternal distinction. And Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, never was there a time when you did not exist, Arjuna, nor all these kings. They always existed. And they will continue to exist even if they die on the battlefield. So what are you lamenting about? And never will there be a time when I, Krishna, Bhagavan, does not exist. So we all continue to exist. And when we wrap our mind around that fact, eternal existence, then the fear of death goes away. We no longer fear death. We simply see it for what it is. At worst, it's a transition from one body to the next. That's the worst. And at best, we're meditating on Krishna at the time of death, and we go back to our eternal loving service. So there's not much to lose by doing this. And my mother once told me, it was either my mother or my sister, I can't remember. She said, "What if it's all not true? What if you're serving God, you're giving up your youth?" At this time, I was young. I became a Hare Krishna in 1972 when I was 22. You're giving up all your youth, and what if it's all not true? And I thought for a second. I said, "You know what? I'm still having a good time. Being a vegetarian and chanting is still fun and ecstatic, and all the people that I've met and all the friendships I've made, there is no loss." And then you throw in the fact that by doing this, I can reestablish my loving relationship with God. So that makes it all worthwhile for sure. Thank you for sharing that with us, Shaktiman. I appreciate that. That
Thank you,
analogy,
Prabhu.
drop of ocean water in the ocean, and the gold and the gold mine. That's a very good. Helps us.
Yeah, and you reminded me the sunshine. So thank you, Prabhu. And I have one question. You mentioned about different levels of ignorance.
Yeah.
Is it the same as the level of consciousness? Like the smoke is fired, fire is covered by smoke.
Yeah.
Child in the womb.
Yeah. That is subset to the main levels of ignorance. Yes. That within I am this body. Then you talk about what body are you identifying with, and how are you identifying with that body? So yeah, the levels of consciousness, even within those categories that I had mentioned, that I am this body is ignorance, but I am a male body, I'm a female body, I'm a young body, I'm an old body, all the various subsets that come along with that. And, uh, Krishna gives in the Bhagavad Gita when he talks about knowledge in the mode of goodness, knowledge in the mode of passion, knowledge in the mode of ignorance, etc. He talks about the levels of consciousness that you have within the illusion.
Thank you, Prabhu.
So thank you, Shaktiman. Anyone else would like to say something or share their realizations? If not, I'll stop here, and we'll have class next week. Yeah, the next week. And then we'll have a break, for the holidays, and then we'll resume. I'll put the dates in there and all that for your information. So thank you all for taking the time out, sharing your evening with me. I hope that you have a very happy, healthy, and holy week. And until we see each other again, um, next Tuesday, or maybe some of us will, those of you who live in this area, I have a program, my wife and I having a program at our house, Kirtan and Feast at our house. Please come. That is Saturday, the 20th at 4 p.m. Your attendance would be wonderful and greatly appreciated. So we'll see you till that time.
Hare
Thank
And
you.
Hare
Krishna,
Krishna.
thank you.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna. And Triana, I'll see you on the 25th or 6th.
Ah,
I'll be.
looking forward. Yeah.
Thank you.
Jai Jagannath. Hari good.
Jai Haribo.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Jai Jai.